I would now like to take a moment and introduce the highlight of our evening. Tammy is a survivor of domestic violence, a courageous advocate for domestic violence, and most importantly, she's a mother. Tammy became vocal when she shared her daughter's story with Break the Silence against domestic violence on Facebook a year ago. Tammy comes from us from Corpus Christi, Texas. She flew all the way out here to give tonight a main purpose and to bring hope and better days to each and every one of us. She's here to inspire all of you to help BTS help them make a difference. So can I please bring her up? Big, great help in the auction. Let's come on up, Tammy. Thank you so much for coming all the way up here from Texas.
Thank you. As I thought long and hard about what I was going to say tonight, I kind of threw it out the window. So, I came here tonight to talk about Brandy, to tell Brandy's story. 2 years ago, I was stumbling around in the dark. If I had to describe to you who my daughter was tonight, I would describe her as a mother would, and she was the color in my world. She was the air that I breathed. She was my firstborn child. But before I get started tonight, I would like to read a letter that one of Brandy's very best friends wrote. She called me last week and said, "Mama Tammy, you have to tell them." She said, "Just go and tell them." So tonight I'm going to start by reading this letter from Heather, and it will give you a very vivid image of who Brandy was. Brandy was not just an ordinary friend to me. To me, she was the party after the party was over. When everyone left, it was just me and her. That's when the memories and the party began. We often owned the night on the hood of our car. We would sit there and stare up at the stars and laugh and talk about our problems with guys, work, and with life. With just the two of us. We both shared a passion for music that could speak to us. When we found a song that could do that, it was put on repeat while we sang at the top of our lungs, sometimes through tears. There was no judgment in the lyrics that we sang. There was only complete and utter understanding for each other. Honesty is something you could find with Brandy. She was not afraid to love her friends, even if she might get hurt. She never held back. Our friendship was the type that could make a trip to Walmart turn into having to hurry home to change my pants, from laughing so hard that I peed myself. I, among many of her closest friends, have had the honor of wearing pee pants many times. When the world got a little too crazy, when our hearts were broken, our pride was busted, we knew we could count on our friendship to pull us through. Her friendship to me is something that I will miss forever. Not many people can say they had or have best friends, but I can, and she was one of mine. To know that there was that one person in the world who you could call, talk to, cry to, vent to about anything or everything, no matter what time it is or what they have going on, is what makes life a little easier to go through. The first time I met Brandy, I was sitting on a porch by myself in tears over a deep and depressing heartbreak. Her first words to me were, "Hey, what's wrong? Here's a drink, tell me all about it." We sat on those porch steps and talked for hours. While the party was inside, my party was outside, sitting on the porch right next to me. If I would have known she would have been taken away from us at such a young age and so soon in my life, I can honestly say I would not change anything about our friendship. We lived and we helped each other grow up. I could tell Brandy when she was wrong, and she could tell me when I needed to grow up. We had our fights, which some people might regret once they lose someone they love, but I don't, because I had the opportunity to mend those wounds, take back those words that may have hurt her, and tell her how much I appreciated her friendship, and it brought us closer together. Brandy has helped me more than she ever knew just by being her. Losing Brandy has hurt me in so many ways. As the time passes, the anger has lessened. but missing her only gets worse. Nobody said life was fair. But I will tell you, losing your best friend by the hands of anger has taken so much away from everyone that has ever had the privilege to love and know Brandy. And that is not fair. When I think of our friendship, I think of the years of heartbreaks and mistakes, the years of growing up and learning life's lessons. I think of all the ways that Brandy made a point to be there when no one else was. When someone like that is taken away from you, just the thought of experiencing anything else without them ever being a part of it makes you hurt all over again. But it is Brandy's friendship that has taught me what it means to be grateful and forgiving, even when it hurts. And those were from Brandy's best friend, Heather. And yes, I'm gonna cry.
You got this.
Thanksgiving night 2010 began and ended like most Thanksgiving nights. Lots of really good food. I went home and went to bed. And my husband comes in at 11 o'clock at night and turns the light on, and I looked at him like, really? I just ate half a turkey. I know you're not coming in here to get some loving. I took one look at my husband, my best friend in the whole world, and realized the light was not on for loving that night. He took one look at me, and all he could get out of his mouth was, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And then he kept looking at me and he said, "I can't say this." He knew at that very moment that the next words out of his mouth were going to change the one person in the world that he loved more than anything. He knew that once those words were out, I was never going to be the same. We make it a habit in our house not to say words that you can't take back. It was really hard for him that night because he didn't want to say it. I finally grabbed him and said, "Just say it." "What?" And he said, "Brandy's been shot." Well, I got out of my bed and started putting on my clothes, and I was like, "Well, take me to her." And he was like, "No, she didn't make it." And I got really angry, and I was like, "Who would say that? Who told you that?" And he had relayed this story that a friend of ours from our church had come by. And I went to the door and I got this friend to come back in the house and tell me what was going on. That night, Brandy and Robert, her live-in boyfriend, who she had only lived with for 3 weeks, she had just moved in with him. They had dated for off and on for a year. They had been at a bar drinking. There were people in the course of that night that knew that they were fighting. Robert's 2 nephews offered Brandy a ride home that night. And Robert looked at them and said, "If you give her a ride home, I'll never speak to you again." The bartender offered Brandy a ride home. She said, "No, I got this." Imagine how his nephews feel today, because after they left that bar, driving down the road, Robert put a gun to Brandy's head and pulled the trigger. Then he went home, smashed his truck into his house. When that didn't take him out of this life, he carried Brandy's body in the house, set the house on fire, and took his own life. They could have given Brandy a ride home that night, and it would have changed everything. And their cousin would still be alive to speak to them. As it is now, 2 families have lost people that they really care about. As I was going through the emotions of planning Brandy's memorial service, I was sitting there that night and I kept thinking to myself, I don't know how to do this. You know, when you find out that you're expecting and that you're going to have a child, most mothers, we read books, what to expect when expecting, and all of those books to prepare us. I don't think that there was ever a book written to prepare you on how to bury a child. If there was ever a book written, who would read it? I wouldn't have. I went through the anger, the shock, then the depression set in. Along with that depression came some behaviors that were extremely self-destructive. Brandy was gone. I didn't know how to deal with this. There was an addiction to prescription drugs, because when you're going through something like that, doctors like to prescribe anti-anxiety, sleeping meds, and didn't take me very long to figure out that if one pill made me go to sleep for 3 hours, 4 or 5 might make me sleep for 12 or 13. And if I was asleep, then it didn't hurt, and I didn't have to think about it. So I quickly became addicted to the medications. Facing legal troubles, my behavior was just beyond destructive. One night I decided I was just done hurting. When you lose a child and you have those dreams of seeing her get married, watching her have your first grandchild, domestic violence stepped in and stole those dreams. It took them away in 1 minute of anger. I was done. I didn't want to hurt anymore. So one night, I took a lethal overdose of all of the prescription meds. My family was out for the evening, and I was like, I just want to go to sleep, and I don't want to wake up anymore. I didn't want to hurt anymore. I woke up the next day, and I was like, God, are you kidding me? Really? This is some cruel, hurtful joke. I am still here. And then I started praying, and I was like, obviously you really want me to talk to you. And I spent a lot of time in prayer, and I wrote Brandy's story out. And then on the 2-year anniversary of her death, I shared it on Facebook, and I shared it with Break the Silence Against Domestic Violence. Kristen read Brandy's story. She shared Brandy's story. I had a friend tell me that we wouldn't stop until 2 million people had heard Brandy's story, and that it was going to change lives. And it's changed my life by actually speaking. Whenever I started sharing my story with Kristen, and she shared hers, and I started reading the posts, I realized that I wasn't alone. Unfortunately, I'm not the only mother that has lost a daughter to domestic violence, and that's not acceptable anymore. You know, 13 years ago, I packed up and left my abuser. Brandy and Sean were small, and we walked away. There were no discussions. I just took back control of my life. 8 years later, when Brandy was packing up her things to leave her abuser, she never had a discussion with me. There were conversations that just weren't had. It's time we start having those conversations. We need to talk about this. You know, I challenge everybody in here tonight. Go home and have this conversation with one person. If you've never experienced domestic violence in any way in your life, tell Brandy's story. She was 22 years old and beautiful and the light of my life. Tell them about domestic violence, how it's a dream stealer. And I feel like I was robbed that night. The world was robbed because Brandy was such an amazing human being. When I think about what BTS is, what this organization has done, they came alongside me in the darkest time in my life. And a little bit at a time, they helped me put the pieces back to my soul. At first, I thought BTS was just a Facebook page, but it is so much more. The prevention and education programs that these people are doing, I wish Brandy would have been able to get some of this in her life. I wish that she would have had the education that Kristen offers to at-risk youth. The work they are doing is real, and it's real important. You know, I stand up here tonight and I can't bring back Brandy. Nothing I can say or do will ever bring her back. But for the rest of my life, I have a purpose. It is to go out and it is to tell Brandy's story, Kristen's story, Sherry's story. You know, and I do it for my future grandchildren. I do it for, if you don't have children, it's for your future children. So that you don't have to stand up and say, my daughter was shot at the hands of anger. What BTS reminds me of is my favorite creature. I have a thing about dolphins. And what dolphins do, when a dolphin is sick and injured, the rest of the pod or the dolphin family will literally swim up underneath that dolphin. And they will swim under that dolphin day and night. They will fight off sharks, every predator. They will do this nonstop until that dolphin is well enough to swim on its own again. And then it comes back and it joins the rest of the pod and it returns the favor. So tonight I want to thank you, Kristen, BTS, Yayays, Nicole, Steve. You're my dolphin pod. Thank you so much for being my dolphin pod and for being my family. Good night.
What now?
Right. First of all, I really want to thank Tammy Willett for coming out here so far and for being so brave and of getting up, dusting herself off, picking herself up, and being able to help others through their time of need. You know, this is just such a dear cause. I don't think there's not anyone in this room or anyone that doesn't know that they do not suffer from domestic violence. Now, whether it is with a significant other, a family member, or a parent, or maybe just battling demons within yourself, you can abuse your own self. But it is the lack of education that keeps you from carrying on. And here, this organization is giving the tools to teach this education to help people grow, prosper, have healthy relationships, and do not have tragedies like we just heard. So right now, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna basically ask you guys to dig deep in your pockets and give out of your heart to help the education programs go forward. Because the one thing that we need, with the way social media is, and all the bright colors, whether you want to say violence, or whether you want to say sexual intuitions, or everything else our young youth has to fight. The one thing that I know about this organization is I do about at least 35 nonprofits. And every time I turn on my Facebook page, well, not that, but what I see is break the silence in my face. So that is one positive against one negative. So it's already a proven fact that where your money goes doesn't grow individuals, but it grows their souls, grows their insides, grows their character. And you cannot put a price on that. It has already been proven. So right now I want everyone, if you don't mind, if you could dig deep in your pocket, and if I could get $1,000. $1,000 contribution, 100% tax deductible, $1,000 bid out here.